Hey, what's going on, guys? So you see those benches on the internet with the coolers in the middle? I was asked a couple months ago, before the weather was nice, if I thought I could make one. So I gave it a shot, and here's what I came up with. So here's the bench. This is the second and third one that I made. I already gave the first one away to the person who originally asked if I could make one. It's an Adirondack style. I've been making chairs that are similar to this for, well, ever since I started woodworking a few years ago. So I just took that design that I already had and pretty much added this cabinet to the center. That just opens up to your cooler in the middle. So that's it. If you want to see how I did it, stay tuned. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks, guys. So I'm setting up outside. I don't like cutting that treated wood in the garage, so I go outside. That way all the dust stays out and it's not getting all over everything in the garage. You'll see most of the tools I'm using, the saw, well, both saws and the router, they're all garage sale items. I probably don't even have $100 in the three of them. The screw gun and the drill, they were bought brand new. But I like using this stuff outside. It's small and easy to move around. Then I don't have to drag out all the other stuff. So when I came up with the plans for this, it was all based off an old rotten chair that a buddy of mine gave me. I just took it apart and took all the measurements and traced all the pieces. That's where I got the plans from. I didn't buy any plans. This wasn't anything official. But when I was coming up with this, I took the time to plan out each cut on the board, so that way I would have the least amount of scraps possible. I wanted to get the most for my money. So here I'm just using a little bit of masking tape, and I write what each of these boards is, and then I just leave the board with the masking tape and the label on top and put all the pieces under it. That way I don't get confused as to what piece is what, because some pieces are close to the same size as others, so if you're not paying attention, then you might try to put the wrong piece somewhere else, or you might cut something the wrong width. So on these boards here, I made a bunch of the first cuts, which were longer pieces, and then I set the back end of them aside because there was a bunch of pieces that were going to be the same length coming out of those boards. So I set them aside, and then I just set up this little stop block, which is just a piece of plywood clamped down to the table there, so I could make all the cuts quick and easy that way rather than measuring each individual one. I do that when I can, but when you're doing this and you're trying to maximize what you get out of each board, you can't always do that. So here I use a piece of scrap wood to make sure that I'm cutting right down the center of these boards, because a lot of these, for like the seat slats and stuff, they just need to be ripped in half so they're all an equal width. So you just use that scrap wood, and you just keep cutting back and forth and flipping the board over to make sure that you're in the center. So I just, like I said when I talked about the tape, it's just important to stay organized. So I keep everything grouped together, and I make all of the cuts on the table saw at the same time. There's been times where I wasn't too organized and I accidentally ripped things down to the wrong width, and then you're kind of screwed, and you gotta go get a new board and start all over on those pieces, and that's a big waste of money. So I just can't stress when you're making something that has all these pieces. It's so important to stay organized so you don't end up screwing up, and it also helps for efficiency, so you're a lot quicker when you're organized and you know where everything is and what you're cutting. So I've made quite a few of the Adirondack chairs that these benches are based off of. So what I did to make things easier is I went and got some of that Luan, this 1/4 inch plywood, and I made a bunch of templates. That way I don't have to measure and mark and measure and mark so much. I can just grab the template and I lay it down on the board and just trace my profiles. That makes things a heck of a lot quicker and easier. So if you're planning on doing a whole bunch of these, I would suggest that. It makes things so much easier. So the first ones that I was just cutting there, those were the armrests. These are going to be the back legs. Same process as the armrest, just lay the template down, mark your lines, cut it with the skill saw. So whenever I'm doing something like this that has a lot of pieces, I try to stick to one task at a time. So if you're cutting, you make all your cuts. If you're drilling holes, then you drill all your holes. So there, I use the template. I marked out all of my legs. Then I start making all the cuts. It wastes a lot of time when you're switching back and forth between doing this task and doing that task. You have to readjust what you're doing. It's a lot quicker to just stick to one thing. So here I give all the armrests a quick sanding on this belt sander with it's like an 80 grit belt, and that really eats away at that end grain pretty quick. The orbital sander it doesn't take away enough material. These belt sanders really dig in a lot. So this router is just a cheap router I picked up at a garage sale with a cheap bit in it. Works pretty good for doing this type of stuff. And that's just a piece of plywood that I mounted the router to, and I just clamp it down to those boards, and that's pretty much all you need for doing this stuff. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. So coming up here is just a quick shot of all of the pieces for 2 bench, and it's a lot. All of that table in the background in front of the truck, that's all the scraps that I had left for making all these cuts. So as you can see, planning out each cut on each board to maximize or to minimize your waste, it's worth the time, especially if you're making a bunch of these. There you saw me using a template again to mark out all of the holes that I have to pre-drill for the screws. Again, the templates make things go so much quicker, and they keep everything uniform looking. That way you're not measuring and marking and drilling, and because that takes a lot more time. And if you keep all your holes the same like you meant to put them there, then that makes things look a heck of a lot nicer. So these are the backrests. This wood is wet. It's always green when you buy this treated lumber. So the backrests being full width, or I think they were full width, they shrink quite a bit. So if you put a space in between them when you first attach them, then the space just about doubles. And I don't like the way that looks, so I keep all of these butted right up against each other, and then by the time they dry, you're left with a nice 1/4 inch gap, and it looks good. So here's just the garbage can lid that I use to get the radius for the top. I just tend to use whatever I have laying around in that garbage can lid. Seems to be a nice radius for these. It makes a nice looking seat back. And then you just cut it out with the jigsaw. And here I'm just attaching the back legs to the front legs. I put one screw in. I measure the distance up from the bottom of the leg that the back leg is, and then I put one screw in it, and then I set it down on one of those boards. That way I can adjust so the legs are sitting as flat as I can on those boards. That way, that's going to help so things don't rock and stuff, rather than just screwing all of your screws in there. If one of those boards was off, then that could throw your chair off and make it pretty wobbly and wonky. And here you're just attaching the seat slats. That just a scrap piece with a couple of nails in gives me a nice spacing for the seat slats, because they are cut a lot thinner there. They don't shrink as much, so I put a little bit of a space that ends up it's a little less than a 1/4 inch, I think. And then again, when they dry, you're left with a nice spacing in between them, and it looks good. So these pieces are what's going to be the cabinet that holds the cooler. So what I do is just attach these slats to the back. Those up and down pieces there are going to be back legs for the cooler box. They'll eventually get screwed to the back legs of the chair, and then the front there, you can see how it goes together now. And then everything just gets screwed together, and that ties in both of the chairs with the cooler box and makes everything really sturdy. And then I just use this board here to make sure that we are everything's even. So these front slats, again, they're full length of the bench, so they really tie in the two chairs and the cooler together and make it all one unit. So when you're attaching the front rail here, you just make sure that the reveal along the front seat slat there, and in between the front seat slat and the front rail there, just make sure the reveal's the same, and that should line everything up and make everything even, so that way when it sits on the ground it sits flat. Those boards I'm using as a table are bowing a little bit in the center, so that's why they're not touching there. And there I just used the big bar clamp to pull that leg in, because it was bowing out to the side a little bit for whatever reason. And again, using the nails as a spacer. And here's where the bench starts taking shape and starts looking pretty good. And now those are floorboards. On the bottom of the cooler box, the cooler just has feet in the front and back, kind of built into the cooler, so I just put 2 floorboards on it. You don't need any more than that. That'll just catch debris that happens to fall down in between the cooler and the box, so it's better to leave it open. And then I just close in the sides here, same as I did the seat slats. And here I got some, I guess they're panhead screws, I guess would be the proper name for them. Almost like a lag, just with a big flat head on them. And I use those to attach the cooler to both of the chairs. That way they're a little stronger than just the screws are. So I put them in the front and the back. They seem to really draw everything in and hold it all real well. Then just adding some more slats to the front. And here I am marking out where I have to drill my countersink for the screws that will hold the armrest in place. And then on the back side of the armrest, I just draw a few lines as references so I know where the armrest lines up on the front leg, as you see there. And then I just run some screws in. And here you can see I forgot to put the arm brace on, so that's what I'm doing now. Normally I do that before I put the armrest on, but I forgot, so there I am. Those screws say that they're self-drilling screws and you shouldn't have to pre-drill, but I always pre-drill because they do tend to crack the wood. And though pre-drilling, it takes a couple extra minutes, but it's definitely worth doing because the end result's so much nicer. And that board was just the backrest support. And here you see me adjusting a couple of my seat slats were a little off, so I had to adjust them. The backrest wouldn't fit. It's a snug fit. I make the backrest just barely big enough to fit in between the two back legs, and then the backrest is also notched so it sits on the back legs just for a little extra support. So it's a pretty tight fit, so sometimes I gotta adjust things to get it to fit. And there again, using a template to mark the hole locations. That way everything looks uniform and neat. So now I'm just gonna attach the lid to the cooler cabinet. You just get some outdoor hinges from wherever, hardware store, Walmart, anything. Just as long as they're meant for outdoors so they don't rust. So the cooler for the cabinets, you get them, most of the coolers have handles and stuff on it, so you just pop the handle off, pop the top off, then you got to cut off those little tabs that act as the hinge for the top, because that's no longer needed. And you just attach the top to some runners and screw the runners to the lid. Right here, my camera stopped recording, so you don't get to see that, but there's a picture of it. That's what it looks like. And there's the finished benches. There's a couple of normal Adirondack chairs behind it. You can see the resemblance. That's just basically the same chair. So, thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to give me a like and subscribe if you want. Both of them are much appreciated. And I will see you guys on the next project.